Welcome to the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee. We are going to be hearing public testimony on addressing elder abuse in Minnesota long-term care settings this morning. And next week, today we will be hearing from families and families of victims. Next week we will be hearing from the care providers. They will be at next week's meeting. And then the week after that, we will be having the Office of the Legislative Auditor with their report. They will have it done in time, so they will be coming to us and going over their report. How this is going to work this morning, everybody has 3 minutes, and I'm very sorry. I know I've met with quite a few of you in my office, and I know your stories are a lot longer than 3 minutes, but that's all the time we're allowed in this room today. We have timers over here, so they will show us when you're at, I know, this is how things operate here. So if you could just kind of pay attention to your time, because we have 25 people on the list that need to speak this morning, that would like to speak, and we want to make sure we get everybody in on time. If you, everybody has this list. If you could come up 3 at a time, that will help save time. And then when the 3 finish, then go back to your seat, and then the next 3 come up, because that'll save time. So we're going to get going right away with Cheryl Hennon, the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and then Sheila Van Pelt and Irene McCormick. Come on up.
Good morning.
Thank you, Ms. Hennon. Announce your name for the tape.
Good morning, Chairperson Housley and Senate committee members. My name is Cheryl Hennon, and I am the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman for Minnesota. I'm here today to represent the voice of long-term care consumers around the state of Minnesota. The Ombudsman Program is a program of the Minnesota Board on Aging, which is a 25-member governor-appointed board. Currently, 15 regional ombudsmen on staff statewide and 50 certified ombudsman volunteers. Federal law mandates all states to have an ombudsman for long-term care program. It was enacted in Congress in 1978 with the primary purpose to ensure resident rights are honored, and as a front line of protection for the health and welfare of people who receive long-term care services. The Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program is the only program of the Federal Older Americans Act that must provide a regular presence to consumers in long-term care facilities. Oftentimes, the Ombudsman is the first person a consumer will confide in about abuse, fear of retaliation, and that their voice is not heard. Elder abuse can happen to anyone, a loved one, a neighbor, and as we age, it could happen to us. It affects seniors across all socioeconomic groups, cultures, and races. It can occur anywhere, in a person's own home, nursing home, assisted living facility, other institutional settings, or in hospitals. What we learn is many victims are reluctant to report abuse because they feel ashamed and embarrassed, particularly if a family member or a caregiver is the abuser. They may be in denial that the abuse is occurring or unaware that what they are experiencing is abuse or neglect, are afraid that if they report, the abuse will get worse. Some victims are unable to speak out due to dementia or other impairments and may not be believed when they do speak up. A culture of ageism and a fear of growing old may keep older people marginalized and undervalued in our society. Hence, their problems remain invisible or are viewed as unimportant. People who live in nursing homes or other adult residential settings, including the fact that we have 5 veterans homes in the state of Minnesota, they receive long-term care services. They often explain to us what it is like to experience an imbalance of power. We must work together to empower people to feel safe, to speak up, and include actual consumers in our work groups and in our meetings. We also must support the rights that residents and family members have to organize councils and speak up as a group. If you have been aware, which I'm sure you are, of recent media stories, Groups of seniors who organize do make positive things happen. As ombudsman, we handle a variety of complaints. Not all complaints are about care provided by a facility. Some complaints are about outside agencies, services, or individuals, such as relatives or members of the community. So to quantify our work, complaints investigated by ombudsmen are on the increase from 2,100 in federal fiscal year 15 to over 3,300 complaints investigated in federal fiscal year 17.
Thank you, Ms. Hennen. Wrap up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you for keeping me on task here. We, in federal fiscal years, served well over 13,000 individuals in the state of Minnesota, providing them with consultation and information. I commend the work of this committee. You remain steadfast on many levels to ensure change. I commend the family members and others who have come forward to expose the problems and tell their loved ones' stories. Now action must be taken. We must work together with all invested stakeholders and include the actual consumer voice to improve consumer protections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hennen. Ms. Van Pelt?
Okay. Hi, I'm Sheila Van Pelt, Madam Chair, members of the Long-Term Care Committee. So pleased to be here before you testifying. And as just to say off bat, when I go over, if I do, you tell me right away and I'll zip it. I want to make sure you know that I'm thankful that all of you are working together to make sure that people do deserve to feel safe and that you see to it that people do deserve to feel safe. Thank you to the media. I mean, hats off to the media. Chris Sears, bless you. And to all of those who have done some fabulous stories, be it Jeff Balian, Laura Lemanchuk, Eric Shalou. You know, you have brought this to us. And why is this committee here acting today in the way we are? Why did you hold your press conference? Which, thank you, is because these stories are there. They're out there, and they aren't being buried any longer. Long ago, I've heard this, and I live by this when I come to the Capitol, because I have reported red flags one after another, year after year since 2011. When do reported red flags finally start to mean something? And the answer is when the media reports it. When everyday people, if they don't come in groups, if they don't have support, their voice gets drowned and they get shut down. And I've experienced that. It's not meaning to complain, it's just the reality that it is. I have given you binders in advance, or not binders, folders. And you'll find different data points I have within there. This one actually is a story from 2013 where the Minnesota Department of Health Office of Health Facility Complaints investigated the facility where my mom lived. They didn't find any wrongdoing, but unfortunately, it wasn't until 2 years ago I learned that they did not investigate the correct facility. They did the on-site investigation to another facility. Needless to say, it wasn't a great scenario for us. What brings me to the Capitol? For many of you, I have to say I apologize to you where my emails are long. I communicate maybe in ways that get bothersome, but I document facts, okay? So when I'm here, I want to make the system better from the bottom of my heart, and I want to shore up the holes in the net. And actually, what it really comes down to is what we're seeing now. I want to bring light to things that many people want desperately to be kept in the dark. The incident that unfolded to my mother occurred in 2010, but it was not without there being a prior documented set of events known to both the medical provider group, which is an HMO, and to another entity, the facility. In the days leading up to a devastating stroke, telltale symptoms reappeared at nearly the same point as it did with the prior incident, while on week 2 on a prescription medication. Both the HMO and provider and the management staff reaffirmed to me they would carefully watch over Sheila Pedig so she would not needing to be hospitalized again. Well, it happened, but not before I walked in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Pelt. Thanks for respecting the time, too. And thank you for coming to visit us time and time again. Thank you. Ms. McCormick.
Hi, Madam Chair Housley and Committee on Long-Term Aging. My name is Irene McCormick, and I'm here to tell a story of 3 places that my mother was. The first one was a nursing home, and she ended up there because she had a stroke. And I was originally taking care of her, and the doctor said I could no longer care for her by myself. And so just to keep it condensed, one of the first incidents that happened was I brought my brother and sister with me one night to see my mom, and I noticed that they didn't have her pants all the way up, and she was sitting in a wheelchair with a dining room tablecloth shoved down her chair to soak up the urine because they didn't bother to take her to the bathroom. They just covered her with a sweater in front and left her like that. Because they didn't care for her hygiene, she ultimately, on New Year's Eve, I went to see her, and she didn't look well. And I took her into the bathroom, and she passed out on the toilet. And I rang the bell for a nurse to come, and nobody came. And so I called 911, and the paramedics arrived in her room with a stretcher before anyone came into her room. Finally, because I had complained so many times, they threatened to put her in a lockdown unit that was for people that had severe behavior issues. I refused. I had meetings with them, and they said, well, then you have to get her out of here. And you have until, this was in December, and you have until January 1st to get her out, or we're moving her. So luckily, I was able to find someone to help me find her a different place. And so I took her to an assisted living that was more homey. And while she was there, they dropped her, and they broke her femur in half.
Oh, God.
And she laid there in pain for I don't know how many days until I saw her on that Sunday. And they said, well, we don't know what's wrong with her. She's screaming. She's not acting like herself. And she was in so much pain. And they had just put her in bed with an ice pack and left her. And so I called 911 again. She was transported to the hospital where they found that her femur was broken in half. Ultimately, the bone came through her leg. She ended up in another facility with a cast on her. Her leg started bleeding. I ended up having to call 911 again. And ultimately, I ended up taking her out of these places. And the last 6 months of her life, I took care of her myself, 24 hours a day.
Thank you so much, Ms. McCormick. I'm sorry. Up next, Kent Edwards, Sandy Lou Brandt, and Gideon Wambua. Please state your name, Mr. Edwards, for the tape, and then timer ladies are over here. Thank you. Go ahead, Kent.
Madam Chair, Kent Edwards, committee, thank you for the time today. Clearly, a lot of families in here, a lot of heart-wrenching stories, and not enough time, not enough justice for hearing what we've gone through, our losses. Real quick, my mother was put into a home last year, January 27th. February 4th, she was taunted, abused, threatened to be burned to death, stripped down naked, mocked for her body. I received a phone call stating that my mother was in a taunting incident and the police have been notified. On my way to the facility, the police station's right there. I stopped and asked for the report. Nothing, there was never a phone call. So I went into the facility with my phone on tape, and I had the director of nursing and the director lied to me for a half hour on what happened to my mother, saying she was possibly called a name, allegedly. I could not talk to the Mark. I couldn't get a hold of anyone that would talk to me. Fast forward, my mother's regressing. Mind you, she was fine going in. She's just a wanderer. As she was in there, her health regressed. I was given a spiel to be put on home hospice health care, which would give her an extra set of eyes and ears. That turned out to be a falsehood, as well as it's hospice care, which means 2 doctors from a certain company signed off that she was signing her death wish. Basically, she had 6 months or less to live. May 23rd, the actual charges came out. That's when I, contacted the police a little bit prior. The facility had seen and heard 10 different audio tapes of the actual assault that happened to my mother. Yet they sat there and told me she was called a name. Unforgivable for someone to sit there and lie to me. And knowing now what happened, I see why they tried to hide it. So they put her, they chemically restrained her, over-medicated her, sedated her to the point where it took away all physical abilities. Eventually, my mother died October 8th in a different facility. It took 6 days for the cops to get there to investigate her assault. The day after she moved out, I was there to move her stuff out, and it took 10 minutes for the police to get there to get me out of the facility, because I was notifying other family members of the assault, abuse, neglect that happened in that facility. I have a lot more. I have video evidence of all kinds of stuff. I'm a guy you want to meet with if you need change.
Thank you, Kent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lubrandt?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Sandy Lubrandt. I want to thank you for holding this hearing today. I am here as a victim representative and a person whose family experienced retaliation multiple times. I am a board member of the Minnesota Elder Justice Center, and I am the team lead for the Mankato and North Mankato Act on Alzheimer's team. My mom passed away in 2012, had 3 nursing home stays, lived in an assisted living setting and a memory care setting. My father-in-law passed away last year and lived in a memory care setting and a nursing home. I can't begin to share all the wrongs we experienced in 3 minutes, but I'll focus on a few briefly. In 2011, after trying to solve multiple and persistent medication errors, the regional ombudsman filed a complaint on my mom's behalf. The first medication error I discovered was that an LPN had called a local pharmacy and ordered a prescription from my mom, indicating that she had a doctor's order, but that was a lie. The investigation's findings are unsubstantiated by OHFC, even though they issued licensing orders. We made a data request and discovered that the facility had provided falsified medical administration records known as MARs. Plus, they didn't fill out the MARs according to state statute. I could prove that they were falsified because she wasn't living there at those days. She was living at the adjoining nursing home. And she never, ever had a prescription from that before that, for that medication. I brought this and other issues in the data to the attention of the OHFC director. I included this in my submission to the Vulnerable Adult Maltreatment Review Panel and to the Board of Nursing. The facts did not result in action. I still can't believe all these groups were okay with falsified records being submitted to the state. Had I had the chance to present my case in person, maybe the results would have been different. I was a much more informed consumer when my father-in-law was locked out of his memory care unit they said he couldn't return following a hospital stay. Even though I could point out all the ways they were violating his rights, it didn't matter. They wouldn't let him return. I also found out that at night, the facility, had a staff ratio of 3 people for 90 residents. When my mom went into hospice in a nursing home, the hospice company didn't do the admission correctly. When I pointed that out, they falsified my sister's signature on the form. I didn't even bother to report it. If you could legislate somebody's moral compass, their competency, kindness, respect, we might not need new laws. I have met and worked with many people in the field for whom I have great respect. If you could clone them, we would be fine. However, that's not possible. Therefore, we need better policies, and we need to enforce the policies that we put on the books. We need your leadership, and we need your support for all of the recommendations in the governor's report. I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Lubrant. Mr. Wambua?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Gideon Wambua, a caregiver for over 14 years. I strongly believe elder abuse is preventable and Minnesota free of abuse is possible. I feel sorry for my my colleagues here, because whatever they have gone through should not happen in the first case. My testimony today is based on two fundamental truths. The first fundamental truth is prevention is better than cure. The second fundamental truth is justice delayed is justice denied. The Consumer Work Group report scores very high on justice for the elderly. Indeed, if the recommendations are implemented as conceived, justice will be served. However, the report falls short on elder abuse prevention. Most of the recommendations are retroactive. Again, the report contains nothing profoundly new on elder abuse prevention. As such, the report's recommendation on elder abuse prevention should serve as broad guidelines within which an elaborate elder abuse prevention strategy should be developed. Madam Chair, allow me to ask a rhetorical question. When you grow old, would you like to be taken to a nursing home? I have posed this question to 187 caregivers over the course of time, starting in 2003 to 2017. 83% of caregivers responded no. 4% responded yes, and 13% were not sure or were non-committal. It is telling that 83% of caregivers have a negative opinion towards nursing homes and would not like to stay in nursing homes when they grow old. The commonly cited reasons are poor services, staff shortages, elder abuse, uncaring caregivers, unfriendly caregivers, stressed out workers, among other reasons. The reasons cited by caregivers against nursing home stays are a form of elder abuse or are potential causes or contributors to elder maltreatment. The results of this simple survey affirm that elder abuse is not just an institutional problem or legal problem. It is a social problem that calls for concerted efforts to change the attitudes and behaviors of caregivers. There is no excuse whatsoever for elder abuse. To prevent elder abuse, an elder abuse prevention training program targeting caregivers ought to be developed as a top priority. Positive attitudes towards the elderly, caregiving function, and workplace should also be developed through an attitude change training program. I have a caregiver attitude survey report that I conducted and I would share with the committee. Maybe you can take time, go through it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wambua. If you want to email that report to us at the committee, we can get that out.
I will do that.
Thank you. Connie Ford, Maureen Switzer, and Corey Tanner. Thank you. Ms. Ford,
Yes.
announce your name for the tape and then go ahead.
Certainly. My name is Connie Ford. I'm the daughter of Ralph Ford. I'm sorry. We've had many years of horrible experience. To begin with, my father had a brain lesion that was diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic. And my partner, Ken George, and I were helping my dad in his home. And we were, honoring his healthcare directives. My siblings did not honor his wishes, and they put him in a memory care unit behind our backs and against my father's will. And in order to keep my father there, they drugged him, they sedated him. He was a very independent person. He was the rehab director for the state of Minnesota, as a matter of fact. Helped a lot of people. This should not have happened to him. From that memory, he got a catheter. He needed a catheter at some point, and so they said he couldn't stay at this memory care unit any longer. But before that, I have been struggling all of these many years to help him, and he wanted to come home with me, and the facility staff surrounded my car and would not let me leave, even to take my father out for a drive. And then they isolated him even further with my sister in control. She was the attorney, in fact. They said they went with the purse. And so then she decided that he couldn't speak to anybody after 4 o'clock, and I tried to help my dad to write a birthday note to his best friend, and I was kicked. They told me to leave the facility. It was after 4 o'clock. I said, well, I'll leave when we're finished with this very important letter. And so then they wouldn't let me be with Dad anymore. They said if I came to May Creek, I would be arrested. And then my sister proceeded to try to become his guardian. And I knew I couldn't let that happen. I continued to look for lawyers. It was very difficult to find one who would stand up for him. And found one. And we went to court so that I could be his guardian. Okay. It's a long story. But I just want to say one thing. Ultimately, he ended up over at Heritage House of Pequot Lakes. Chris Sears did write a story concerning my father where the facility did not follow up with doctor's orders in the care of his catheter. And they weren't letting me be with my father because they were retaliating. There was a guardian at this point, would not let me be with him for a month. He ended up with an infection, and they wouldn't let him leave the facility either. The guardian wouldn't let him leave. So then she wouldn't let him go into the hospital for medical care that he needed. He was sent back to the facility. I was called and told that he was dying. They wouldn't even let me be with him more than 3 hours a day while he died, while they didn't help him, and it was just, it's been a torturous, horrible time, and I'll never get over it.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Thank you. I'm sorry. Ms. Switzer.
Madam Chairperson Housley, Senators, thank you for your time. My name is Maureen Schweitzer. My husband's name was Fred Schweitzer. He was a World War II veteran. In July of 2015, Fred had 2 strokes. His second stroke mostly took out his right side. That meant that I could no longer give him the help that he needed by myself. A full body lift, sometimes referred to as a Hoyer lift, was needed to move him from the wheelchair to the bed and vice versa. Ultimately, he became a resident of the Minnesota Veterans Home. While there, an accident occurred. He was dropped from the lift. I was told that the hanger bar on the lift being used to move him suddenly collapsed, and one of the loops of the sling that held him came off of the hook that secured it, causing the support system to become unbalanced. Fred was not able to shift his weight, so could not have caused the imbalance himself. He was also unable to lift his arms over his head to break the fall. He pivoted a complete 180 degrees, came down on his head and broke his neck. He died 11 days later. He was at the total mercy of the 3 aides that were moving him. 2 aides were required for using a full-body lift, but there happened to be 3 there. I don't know why. Their entire job was to transfer him safely. They should have been trained adequately to ensure that they could always manage that. In spite of the requirement to be carefully observing, all 3 said they had no idea how it happened, and it was so sudden they could do nothing to break his fall. The lift was examined, found to be trustworthy, and was put back in service. To repeat, the lift was examined, found to be in good working order, and was put back in service. I was never allowed to see the report that was filled out that night by the head nurse after interviewing the aides. From the beginning, the Veterans Home has insisted they do not know how it happened, but neither they nor their employees were at fault. It was required that the incident be reported to the Minnesota Department of Health. After investigating, MDH declared the cause to be inconclusive regarding neglect. I appealed that conclusion, and with the help of competent attorneys, the result was changed to substantiated neglect. The situation was tragic enough without the added insult of being treated as if there was no cause. It happened, there was a cause. As I have read and heard other stories, it is obvious to me that there is a deep, systemic problem within the system that allows people in need of help to be harmed or die without any concern for how to prevent the same thing from happening again. I asked the investigator at the Department of Health that worked on Fred's case how they could prevent a reoccurrence. The answer was dead silence. Beyond different laws, there must be changes in a system and perhaps in staff that multiplies the problem rather than correcting it.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Schweitzer.
Thank you.
Mr. Tanner.
Madam Chair, Committee, thank you for having me today. My mother's name is Mildred Tanner. She has had dementia for 3 years and has been in a memory care facility. I was thinking last night, what's the appropriate words I can use today? And I was up late in the night, and I don't have politically correct words to say what I've seen. So, to be blunt, I've seen other residents, my mom, sitting in soiled pants for 4 or 5 hours. I've seen residents with their heads on tables with a plate of food plopped in front of them. People going unattended for many, many hours, deprived of their dinner, deprived of enough staff or people who have training to take care of them. 1 year ago today, my mom broke her leg at 5 in the morning while sitting in her wheelchair and tumbled out. And 2 or 3 days later, she had to have surgery. And I cannot say if anybody was watching her. I found it peculiar. 5 in the morning, she's in her wheelchair in her room. The doctor told me that her bones at age 86 were like drilling through potatoes, and they had to put nuts and screws and nuts and bolts in her leg. She made it through that. But she's been lucky in the fact that my family is so large. She had 8 kids, 18 grandkids, and we're up there visiting her 3 to 5 days a week. And she's also had a large Facebook following documenting her journey through dementia. But still, my mother has, at times not not had her health care directive followed, even depriving her of water when she's requesting it, depriving her of food when she's requesting it. She's down to 98 pounds at this point. So I was told, do not give your mother water. It's going to hurt her worse. It's going to make her aspirate. And at this point, if my mom wanted a beer, I would give my mom a beer. She's 98. She's asking for it. She's deserved it. She's lost about 100 pounds in this last year. But she still wants to eat. So I go get her shakes from McDonald's and bring them to her, and she drinks them. So I would just say I would love to talk to some of these other families that, you know, in this case, in this particular facility, they don't have the family there like we do. They don't have this Facebook following. They don't know what's going on. I witnessed a woman for 3.5 hours not be checked on, and her dinner was skipped, and I was in the room the entire time. So I felt today I have to be my mom's voice, but so many of these other people, I don't think they have the families that are large like that to come see this stuff, and I've seen it 3 to 5 days a week. So,
Thank you, Mr. Tanner.
thank you.
And stick around because I don't know if you've met Christine Sundberg here from Elder Voices, but if you want to talk to her after to connect with some of the families, she's here, so she'll be coming up soon.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all three of you. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Mrs.
Madam
Senator
Chair,
Hoffman.
Madam Chair, thank you. These are just moving, horrendous stories, and there's a couple of themes, Madam Chair, if we could as a committee look at, and maybe the ombudsman can get us that information. I heard HMOs mentioned, and so it would be interesting to find out if there's some kind of a trend on how the services are not or being provided. And then the second one is on these facilities, if we could get a breakdown of whether private, if there's a trend toward the private side, private for-profit, nonprofit, and just see if we can kind of flesh out just if there is any kind of trending on there. And I would thank you for that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Up next, Deb Singer, Robin Roberts, and Samantha Shields.
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Dr. Debbie Singer. Thank you for this opportunity to share my experience with you regarding my mother. It's only been about 4 months, so bear with me. My mother was a vibrant, independent, 92-year-old Austrian redhead who enjoyed a variety of activities and was genuinely concerned about the welfare of others. In 2013, when she needed to move to a senior-assisted living community, we thought we had found the place that could meet her needs while maintaining her independence and also give us peace of mind knowing the residents were monitored on a daily basis. They had the Platinum Service Awards displayed, a beautiful dining room, etc. The daily check was as follows. The resident was to push a button by 10 a.m., and if they didn't, a phone call was to be made to their apartment, and if they didn't answer, a person was sent to the apartment. My mother adjusted to her new home, became a board member as the ambassador to the new residents. In 2016, the return of esophageal cancer after 30 years eventually led to a feeding tube as she could no longer swallow. She remained independent, did all of her own feedings and her medications, and continued with her daily activities. On Tuesday, October 24th, 2017, we met with my mother at 12:30. Housekeeping came at 2:15 at the end of the meeting, and at that time I did not know it would be the last time I would see my mother alive. On Wednesday, October 25th, I met with the funeral home to do pre-planning for my mother's funeral and stated that it felt better to be doing these months in advance. We're not under emotional distress. Little did I know that my mother was already gone and that I would be back on Friday. That evening, I received messages from my siblings concerned they'd not heard from our mother. Believing that the facility would call me if anything was wrong, after all, they'd called me when she had fallen in the past, I told them that she was fine and I'd be seeing her the next day. On October 26th, I called my mother as I left work, leaving a message I was on my way. When I arrived, 2 days of newspapers were outside her door, along with activity papers from the facility, and boxes of formula supplies were stacked next to the door.
My heart was pounding because I knew something wasn't right. Her door was unlocked, and when I opened it, it was dark. I flicked on the light switch, and to my horror, she was lying there lifeless in her lift chair. She was laying at an angle with her legs hanging over the front rest, blood on the floor, the footrest, and the back of her chair. Her entire neck was bruised, and she was wearing the same clothing she had on Tuesday. One of her hearing aids and a stuffed kitten toy I'd given her on Tuesday were on the floor under her footrest. There was an odor present, and as I surveyed the room, my stomach turned. She clearly did not die peacefully. Her apartment was spotless, and her medications were untouched since Tuesday. As the front desk didn't know what to do, I called the hospice triage line, who then called the police and the medical examiner. The medical investigator documented the scene and the timeline of my mother's death with photographs and agreed that she had died on Tuesday within a couple hours after we had left. About the extensive bruising, she said it was common after death. When I asked for an autopsy, she said, well, she'd have to go to Rochester and it just wasn't feasible, and that her office really didn't do autopsies on these type of situations because they spent their time on suicides and murders. Long story short, the medical examiner's office apologized because she should have had an autopsy and that her report was marked as trauma-free when she was not. A daily check is a simple, basic amenity, and it was one reason why families believe they have peace of mind when a loved one lives in a community such as this. Daily checks were in her contract and resident services manual. It's a false sense of security. As a veterinarian, I believe we provide better monitoring to our pets, whether it is at a vet clinic, a boarding facility, a doggy daycare provider, or a pet sitting service. Our elders and other vulnerable adults deserve to be cared for and respected, and I want to ensure that no other family has this experience. It is a sad statement in our society that when left to their own choice, the people in charge do not do the right thing, but need rules and oversight to ensure the safety of our loved ones. It is clear that we need comprehensive laws and regulations to provide a level of security and safety that ensures a respectful quality of life to the end for all of our loved ones. Thank you for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Singer. Ms. Roberts.
Hi, my name is Robin Roberts. Thank you for listening. My mother has Alzheimer's, and I cared for her for 2 years before moving her into an assisted living facility in Eden Prairie back on September 5th of 2017. Mom was able to walk with a cane, continent, could feed herself with cues, express her feelings. The facility nurse warned me that Mom would go through a dramatic decline from the transition. Within 10 days, Mom was wheelchair-bound, unable to feed herself, unable to raise her head, unresponsive. Staff said she wasn't eating and at times incontinent. I immediately took Mom to her doctor, who was alarmed by this rapid decline. We found she was being chemically restrained. A week later, the nurse called. Mom had her first unwitnessed fall. I was told an aide left her on the hallway to use the bathroom. When she returned, Mom was on the floor. Mom's care plan specifically states she needs assistance from one staff while walking. 2 weeks later, another call. Mom was found on the floor in the dining room bathroom. An aide brought her there and left. Her care plan clearly states Mom needs assistance from 1 to 2 staff in the bathroom. 1 week later, another unwitnessed fall. Mom was found a great distance from her room on the floor. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the police at 6 a.m. They were taking Mom to the emergency room with a head injury. The staff found her bleeding, laying on the floor. The emergency room had to staple her head to close the wound. When I asked the nurse why was her bed alarm off, and she said she didn't know, but it was switched off. Her care plan states the bed alarm should be on and checked. 4 unwitnessed falls in less than 2 months. Mom's last fall was on October 26th. It finally hit me. Mom's condition had sunk to the level of care she received. I have learned we should not look to or blame Alzheimer's on everything, which I was repeatedly force-fed to me as a reason for her decline. I set the wheels in motion to move her as soon as possible. On October 29th, I found Mom unresponsive, hanging over her chair, food on her face. I cleaned her up, but could not get her to eat or drink. I came back the next day. At 4 p.m., I was called into the assistant director's office along with a nurse. I thought they were going to tell me that they were going to update me on the fall. Instead, they told me Mom was inappropriately touched sexually by another male resident. I was dumbfounded. I have the rest of my story. I thought I had 5 minutes. The rest of
Go
my
ahead.
story is actually about the investigation.
Go ahead.
Do you want to hear that? Okay.
Yes, as quick as
Good.
you can. Thank you.
I thought you might. The director said they reported the incident to the public health department. I told them we were moving Mom and they had an issue with the aides executing care. They agreed. Later, I learned the incident happened on October 28th. The staff took 3 days to notify the family of the incident, even though I was on site and talking to them. The next day, I filed a report with the police department. Standing in the police department is when I broke down. It was surreal. Now, caring for my mother involved the police. A public health investigator called me about a week later. The call went something like this: I will be investigating the incident of the inappropriate touching against your mother. I cannot tell you details of what I find. I cannot ask you or hear from you on any details that you may or may not know. I will let you know my findings once my findings are final. I felt I had entered a very dark room, was told to sit in a corner, do not move, and keep my mouth shut. Then I read the Sunday morning paper, saw Chris's article, gathered all the names and resources, and I called Elder Justice Center. I talked to Amanda. She listened. She talked to me for a long time and gave me space to cry. Then she gave me a list of people I could talk to and things I should do. I called the investigator again. Her response changed dramatically. Now she openly told me what was being done in the investigation. She shared her own frustrations with the process and concerns with the facility. This was a win of openness for us all, I feel. However, in this continuing active investigation, please know there are still several failures going on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Roberts. Ms. Shields?
Hi, good morning, Chair Housley and all committee members. Thank you for allowing me to tell my story today. I am a caregiver for my 70-year-old mother who has alcohol-related dementia. After asking to be relocated from the estate to St. Louis Park for 39 weeks, Monarch Healthcare had an opening at their St. Paul location. My mom wanted to be closer to me. On Christmas Day, I packed her up and brought her to Lyndhurst in St. Paul. I went in first to make sure that her bed was ready. The facility smelled so bad. After finding a nurse and her bed was ready, I went to the car, I opened up the door and told my mom I was so sorry. I had not toured the place. I didn't know that there could be any place worse than where she was at. I should have been told that this place was for people with mental disorders with psychotic episodes. I was not. Her room had a mousetrap in it. The paint was peeling on the outside of the building, and the air conditioner had no cover on it, and the cold air would blow right into my mom's bed. The bathroom did not have the proper handicap-accessible toilet. She would have to lift it forward to flush it. And this didn't go very well for someone who couldn't barely stand. When I confronted the director of Monarch Healthcare, he said, well, you were the one that asked her to be relocated. We had an open bed, and that's what you wanted. So it wasn't a very good solution. Thank God my mom was only there 2 weeks. I called over 10 places to find someone who would take her. She is now 5 minutes from me and doing okay. The fines, Senator Housley, the fines in these facilities does nothing. The facilities just lay off staff and the care gets worse. The owners of these facilities need to be held responsible. They should be here answering questions. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shields. And thank you, all three of you, for your stories. I'm sorry. Jennifer Siegel, Deb Lloyd, and Lisa Papp Richards. Ms. Siegel.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I am speaking out today on my own time. I am not here as an employee. I am here as a professional and a caring individual of the elderly. I have an obligation as a nurse and as a mandated reporter. Most important, I have an obligation to my patients and myself to speak out and act on matters of injustice and human rights for those most vulnerable. My grandma suffered a debilitating stroke. She was hospitalized, then placed in a nursing home, then to a geriatric psych unit. If I only knew then what I know today. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be where I am today. Most people with dementia that have behaviors are a person's way of communicating. They're thirsty, they're hungry, they're in pain, they want something. This is not a behavior. This is communication. I'm a registered nurse. I work full-time in home care. I took today off. I do not believe I work for an employee that has had anything to do with this. But there's a lot of hidden abuse. Public speaking and public policy is new and uncomfortable for me. But as I learn more, and I recently returned to school, I see that to make a difference on a larger scale, I must get involved. We have a massive public health problem that is deep and complex on many levels. I've worked in long-term care, assisted living, memory care, home care for Medicare, Medicaid, and private pay. Elder care is confusing, overwhelming, and a very emotional time for patients and families. It has become so complex that people need a navigator. I'm not here to tell more stories of abuse. I've seen it, I've heard it, I've felt it. I'm here to share my experience as a professional and as a family member and as a mandated reporter, or as one of the good staff, as Senator Housley closed at her last meeting. Thank you, because not all staff are abusers. I have made numerous reports to Adult Protection. I have filed with the Office of Health Facility Complaints. I've made calls to 911. I have never received the help for my patients that they need, ever. I am here to tell you that as a mandated reporter, I have made so many reports in my career, and I've never once had a collaborative discussion with the investigating agency. The only follow-up is the standard letter stating, we have reviewed your report, and there is not enough evidence to support further investigation. I thought I had 5 minutes. I could go on for 20 years. In 2013, MDH was pleased that they added 2 more state surveyors to a total of 3 for the state of Minnesota. We can do better. Senators, thank you for your time. Chris Sears, I don't know who you are. Right there. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. If it weren't for your diligence and care, we would not be getting the attention that this deserves today. There's a lot more. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Siegel. Senator Ralph.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one question, and this is something that has come up several times, that the original intention of Mark's was a single entry point. And the whole idea was you don't have to go shopping around to find somebody to actually report an incident. So from what I'm understanding from your experience, Mark's is not working. You are basically having to go to several different places. Is this what's going on?
No, there's one reporting line. I mean, there used to be several depending on what county you were working in, but so now there's one line. So you call or you email it. But if there are If I go visit a patient the next day and I find abuse again, I can't call back to report anything more. I have to file another report. So there is the one number, but it hasn't made a difference.
Senator Ralph.
Okay. Thank you.
Mark is it's not interactive, so you call and you file the report, and then they transfer it on to whether it's the county or the police officer or the state. So you don't hear back from Mark.
Well, and I think that as we probably found last spring when we had our hearing, that's a problem. Because we're duplicating complaints, assigning different investigators, and creating just more problems. Now, my understanding is there may have been some progress in this, but it seems to me that that's a point that we need to look at in terms of getting a more efficient method of triage, of determining is there already an investigation in this facility, possibly involving the same person. Otherwise, we're just going to bury ourselves deeper in this morass. And I thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Ralph. Thank you, Ms. Siegel. Ms. Lloyd.
Good morning. My story may be a little disjointed because it was 5 minutes precisely now. So
go ahead with your 5 minutes.
Go ahead with my 5 minutes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. My mother was a small business owner, an active member of church and many civic organizations. She loved bowling, bridge, crocheting, and gardening. Twice widowed, she was admired by many as a very strong woman. Fast forward to age 92, when after recovering from a broken hip, we determined it was in her best interest not to live alone and selected an assisted living facility close to my home with 24-hour care where I could visit frequently, daily, and it had many social activities. She seemed to adjust well, although she did occasionally complain about rough treatment and unresponsiveness of aides. But I told her not to make any waves. No place is perfect. 4 months into her stay, after being weak from an UTI and a recent blood transfusion, abusive events repeatedly occurred during the unsupervised night shift. One of the incidents reported to management, in Mom's words, "She pushed me down in the toilet, she shoved me through the bathroom doorway, and I got this bruise." Management advised the aide that she would be suspended pending investigation efforts. Later, the aide called back and quit. The facility dropped the investigation, telling me that appropriate measures had been taken. Aides can quit, and there are no repercussions. They simply move on to other care-providing positions. A couple weeks after that incident, due to money being stolen from a number of residents, Mom and I were both asked if we would allow a camera in her apartment. We agreed to the installation. One morning, my husband and I received several calls from my mom. She urgently needed to see us. Mom told us she had been beat up by a girl last night and that the police had come to her apartment. Here is some of Mom's testimony about the assault. "I sat by the window looking out, and she followed me. She came and slapped my face. Then she tried to kick me. She made me fall, and I tried to grab her leg, but it was too hard for me. I never in my life thought anybody would have the nerve to hit me like that and drag me besides. I was trying to get up. She shook my hands and set them against my face. I was on my left side, dragged by one of my arms. She squeezed. It felt like I was going to die. She grabbed me and pulled me with such force that I could hear my bones. She threw me into the bed." Would this assault have been reported if my mom had not been able to speak for herself? Definitely not. Would she have been believed if the incident were not caught on tape? Probably not. The unlicensed aide was in a 90-day probationary period and was unsupervised on the night shift. She was the only aide on duty at an assisted living facility with 53 units. That's a staff ratio to resident of 1 to 53. Her duties included night care for residents. In my mom case alone, we were paying for 4 toileting assists. That evening, 2 separate sets of emergency responders were unable to gain access to the facility. Why were they there? Because the next call for help, if a call light was not answered, was to the sheriff's department. Criminal charges were filed and a court case followed. The aide was found not guilty because the prosecutor did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the aide had prior intent to harm. Prior intent to harm. She's there to provide care. The judge remarked, "It is troublesome for me as a taxpayer that the sheriff's office has to respond to your facility because you don't have people on staff." Mom thereafter suffered post-traumatic stress. Her life was never the same. She lived in fear. I witnessed many horrific things in the nursing home where my mom later resided. Unplugged call buttons, residents screaming for help, residents be left on toilets with pull cords that didn't work, medication be given to the wrong patient with death the outcome, and relocating positioning of beds, leading to falls and ultimately death for a number of residents. Foreign language being spoken to confuse residents, just to name a few. Please enact regulations that require providers to change their focus from the bottom line and instead manage to these basic home rights. The right to be served by people who are properly trained and competent to perform their duties, the right to be treated with courtesy and respect, and the right to be free from physical and verbal abuse. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lloyd, and I'm sorry. Lisa Papp Richards.
Hello, Madam Chair, Committee, thanks for listening to all of us. My mom is Mary Ann Papp. I'm an only child, and I drove down here for 4 hours, but anyways, I put a camera in my mom's room. My mom went into the facility with a broken ankle. My mom's cast was rubbing on her ankle. The doctor refused to see my mom. The facility did not take my mom to the doctor. This is what my mom's ankle, that's her ankle bone, looked like when the cast was removed. And this is in I think September. I'd have to look at notes for sure. A month or so later, this is my mom's foot. There's not one spot there, but there's 4. So my mom ended up having her right leg amputated in December of 2016. And then she had her other leg amputated in February of 2017. My mom states that she was dropped from a Hoyer lift. The facility denies that. There's a lot of stories that my mom tells me that the facility denies. The facility's records are different from the doctor's office, from the hospital. Everything's different, but except for my mom's story. My mom's story stays the same. So for some reason, I had this gut feeling that I needed to put this camera in my mom's room. I put the camera in my mom's room. The camera was found. I got a phone call from my mom that the facility found my mom's camera and they wanted it removed now. And I said, they can't do that. I talked to my mom's attorney. She wrote up my mom some legal information about my mom give consent to have this camera in the room. My mom signed it. But I went a step further and had it notarized because I didn't want to have to deal with the facility saying that my mom didn't do that. When the facility demanded that my mom call me to come and remove the camera, my mom said, you call Lisa because I'm not doing it. The facility, we went back and forth on it. The facility called the police on me. I was met by security guards twice about this. They filed an abuse report on me, which I didn't know until when I got called down to our county office and they proceeded to tell me about it. Got a report on Friday that they did not find anything, substantiated. They didn't find anything in my favor. I confronted the head nurse about that, and she told me, yes, they did file it because my mom was speaking out more. The facility refuses to hear my mom's voice. The internet service did not work in my mom's room. So I pay for internet. I still pay for the internet because I want that camera back in my mom's room. I want it back in there yesterday. I actually wanted it in there a couple days ago. I don't know what more to do. My mom has okayed it. I've talked to people about it. Everybody has told me they don't understand this is a cut and dry case. Someone from Elder Justice, when we met in Brainerd, said, we know all about your case. But I cannot get that camera in my mom's room. You can see on the video where they had taunted my mom. They don't do their cares. I have caught my mom because there was no aides in to help with the one aide that was changing my mom. If I hadn't been standing there, my mom would have fell flat on the floor. I went out and got somebody, but they were too busy doing their stuff. I really want to focus on this camera, but I have so many stories that I want to tell you. Retaliation is a big deal in these facilities for our loved ones. I can handle retaliation on myself, but I can't handle it very well on my mom. And what these facilities can do, as I have been told by our attorney, is that they can get a restraining order on me. And I can't go up there to see my mom anymore. So I kind of have to limit my conversation with these people. I do need to tell you something that happened the other night because I am still upset that a person can keep their job when they call me a bitch. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but multiple times, because I questioned if their person had training that put my mom in a Hoyer lift to put her in her wheelchair when my mom's legs were hanging out of it. My mom's legs fell through the butt, her left leg fell through the butt of the mesh thing. I have a photo of it. And so I asked how that happened. Did they have training? Because this place continues to have turnover. The nurse did not and would not answer me. She went and got another nurse. This nurse came to me and told me that I was acting like a bitch, that I needed to go home and find some common sense and to quit acting like a bitch. I was a hateful person. Why is it that you keep your mother here if you don't like us? Again, she called me a bitch. I sent and she told me that the head nurse, the main nurse of this facility, did not want to come over and deal with me anymore because she was tired of me. I sent that head nurse a note and I said, I will not put up with this person calling me a bitch anymore. Head nurse came over and she told me, I said, I want her fired. She goes, we can't do anything with that. She said, because she's union. I talked to my mom. My mom was afraid to stay there. Again, if we would have had the camera, I could have seen what happened. Talked to my mom yesterday. She's tired, she's exhausted. You could hear the stress in her voice. My mother could not talk to me alone. There was somebody in my mom's room when she was talking to me. My husband and I drove down together, and I said to him, did you just hear that? My mom said, here, you can have the phone now. Why in the hell can't I talk to my mom by myself? This is my mom. What are you doing to my mom when I'm not there? I want the camera. I want the camera. I'm an only child. I can deal with a lot. But this I need help with. I would like to provide cares to the people that have done this to my mother, as all of these people would do. I filed a complaint with the police department, and the police officer asked me, he goes, what do you want me to do about this? I said, I want you to do your job. You know, my mom is in a nonprofit organization. Facility needs to have staffing. Every person at the facility right now that I have talked to is working double shifts. One of the ladies worked 133 hours in 2 weeks. She had to work on one side of this unit with 10 residents by herself, a double shift. 2 people needed 4 residents needed 2 people assist. She called for help, nobody would come and help her. She had to cook, she had to put people in bed. I know. So please do something this session. Don't just put a Band-Aid on it. Fix this problem, because I don't want to have to come down here again, because I'll talk longer than I'm supposed to.
Thank you, Ms. Pap Richards. Say hello to your mom
I
from
will.
me.
Thank you.
And thank all 3 of you for coming, and thanks for driving in. Thank you. Jacqueline Herron, Joanne Fontaine, and Christine Sundberg. Ms. Herron, welcome. Oh. Ms. Herron, identify yourself for the tape. Thank you.
Chairperson Housley and committee members, my name is Jacqueline Herron. I'm a wife, mother, grandmother, retired teacher, and author of a book which details my mother's elder care experience. My book's title, Singing Solo, in Search of a Voice for Mom, emerged as our family grew to believe that no one listened to or cared about our concerns regarding my mother's care. So I'm here today to encourage support for the Consumer Work Group's recommendations that address elder abuse in Minnesota long-term care settings. I cheer the work group's efforts, and this is why. My mother suffered from debilitating vascular dementia, eventually becoming wheelchair-bound, unable to communicate, and a resident of a well-reputed nonprofit nursing home for the last 3 years and 8 months of her life. During my daily visits, I learned many things about my mother's nursing home experience. I learned that she thrived when compassionate caregivers treated her with dignity and respect. But I also witnessed too many difficult days when her quality of life was negatively impacted by inconsistencies of care from one shift of caregivers to another, failures to implement her care plan when she wasn't repositioned or fed or given fluids so vital in her fight against urinary tract infections, injuries resulting from her cares, and then failure to follow protocol for the injuries, concerns regarding my mother's personal safety, as well as the security of her belongings. Many things disappeared, most heartbreaking, her engagement ring. I learned that person-centered care does not thrive in a facility that's marred by understaffing and high staff turnover. I learned that understaffed weekends and holidays can be especially scary times. I learned that not every staff person is skilled in dementia care. And I learned that people with dementia, those who cannot speak or report, are especially vulnerable and in need of advocates. Since my book's release, I have spoken at dementia conferences, senior living residences, libraries, churches, book groups. During discussions generated at over 40 events, I have learned one more thing. Disturbingly, my mother's elder care story is not an aberration. Many, many families share the helpless and hopeless frustrations brought on by an elder care system that too often fails in the deliverance of care. We look to people with clout, policymakers, purse string holders, to help us advocate for our vulnerable loved ones. Thank you for the work that you do and are continuing to do toward this vital process. And I thank you for this opportunity today to share just a small snapshot of our family story.
Thank you, Ms. Herron. I'm going to have to get your book.
I have copies for each of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. We would like that. Thank you. Ms. Fontaine.
Hi, my name is Joanne Fontaine, and I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and the committee for allowing me to speak on behalf of staff members within long-term care facilities. I've been a nurse for almost 30 years, as well as I have a master's degree in lifestyle wellness management, and I'm currently finishing my doctorate in health education. Let me just say that my goal today is to help see the bigger picture of elder abuse in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, which I believe really stems from workplace culture. I believe that it does not sufficiently support the workers in the facilities. Nurses tend to have a ratio of like 22 to 1. I don't know if you guys realize that or not, and sometimes more than that. And a lot of times it's very entailed work that we have to do. And a lot of times they're lacking the training of working with vulnerable populations. Today I want to share a few incidences that I experienced in my time as a nurse in multiple facilities. These incidents are all too often a reality in long-term care. And keep in mind that there are wonderful care providers out here. And not everybody is bad, but I do want to touch on a few issues that I face on a regular basis here and there. Today, I'll share a few incidences. During our orientation at one facility, the director of nurses told the new staff on the first day, "I have one policy that you must follow." Basically, she was letting us know that we were third on the totem pole. The first group of people, she said, were the patients, and that's understandable. The second group is the facility, and the third group is us, the caregivers. And the way that she portrayed it to us was basically telling us, look, if you have issues, I don't want to hear about it. And if you don't think that you can handle this, you're not going to be here long. That was the way that she spoke to us, and we felt like we were unsupported, basically. Going on, I'm kind of putting this all together quickly because I know I don't have a lot of time. In the same facility, I witnessed abuse and neglect by a staff that was never really reported. One situation involved a resident in a locked memory care unit who became agitated, basically spilled juice on the table and was yelling at the nursing assistant. The nursing assistant got in the resident's face, restrained his hands, and told him to shut up loudly. Attempting to get away from the nursing assistant, the resident thrashed his arms and legs, accidentally kicking the staff. At that point, I asked the nurse manager to intervene. Before the nurse could intervene, the staff balled up her fist and threatened the resident, saying, "You better not do that again, that crap hurt," but basically she used some profanity. I immediately told her to come to the nurse's station because I needed to speak with her. She told me no. The nurse manager at that point had left the area. I told the nurse that I was orienting with, because I was on orientation, that he needed to go and speak with that nursing assistant immediately. So he went and talked to her. And I asked him, did he plan on writing up a report in regards to this? And he said no. He said because if he did, everybody would be mad at him. And he said the reason why everybody would be mad is because they would all have to go home without pay for a week while it was under investigation. And he told me if I reported it, I'd be in trouble too because they'd all be mad at me. Well, I don't care. I went and told the nurse manager, and the lady still stayed on the floor and worked, and she still works there. So that's one issue. Let's see. I'm just trying to condense some of this stuff because I could go on and on. There were other issues that have occurred. I'm trying to find my... let's see, a nurse supervisor was on duty and was very angry at me for calling a doctor one day because I walked into a patient's room that I was taking care of that had a suprapubic catheter, found out that there was an infection involved, pus coming out of it, it was red, there was a bandage that hadn't been changed, you could tell it probably hadn't been changed in over a week, dried red blood. The tape had migrated up the abdomen, and the guy was febrile, he had a temperature. Immediately, I grabbed his chart. He wasn't on any antibiotics. I called the doctor. The nurse manager came up to me and asked me why I was calling the doctor. And I said, well, because there's an obvious infection here. And she said, well, it's not my fault, because usually the TMAs work this hallway. We don't have licensed providers on this hallway, so don't get mad at us, because I was from the agency. And I said, well, this has to be dealt with. You know, we can't sit there and ignore these kind of things. And the doctor told me on the phone, he was like, you know, I'm not surprised. It happens a lot at this facility. But he knew. If he knew, why didn't he intervene before now? Why did it take a pool nurse to come in to figure out that there was a problem? And so she told me, she got mad at me for calling the doctor and told me that I needed to go home. She was going to send me home. And I said, well, not until I get this person on antibiotics and treated. So I stayed there and made sure that person was treated before I went home. But, you know, it just never ceases to amaze me, the things. But anyway, I could go on and tell you a lot more things, but I don't want to take up all your time.
Thank you. If you can wrap up.
Yeah, so basically, I just feel like we need to be more proactive than reactive, and actually that we need to implement some kind of educational programming into nursing schools, nursing assistant programs, and it needs, and actually even in the management, it needs to be from the top down in order to make things really happen and make change, because the environment that we're working in right now is not conducive for quality care.
Thank you, Ms. Fontaine. Ms. Sundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. As you may remember, I'm Chris Sundberg, President of Elder Voice Family Advocates. As you've heard today from many of our members and others, abuse of our elders and vulnerable adults in senior facilities is occurring at an alarming and escalating rate. While we're delighted to see the substantial progress being made by the OHFC and the Department of Health, it is important to remember that the core issue is the abhorrent care and practices that is happening in many of our long-term care facilities throughout the state. We ask that you not lose sight of this. Fixing the OHFC is important, but the need to fix the laws that oversee these establishments is critically important. This situation has reached code red. We cannot let the senior living and care industry continue to do business as usual. Business as usual will only result in more suffering and premature, painful death. As you look at the various legislative proposals that will be introduced this session, please do more than just the incremental fixes. We ask that you address the long-term reforms that are needed and support the recommendations of the Elder Abuse Consumer Work Group. We know it won't be easy, but I cannot stress to you how very important it is for all of our residents living in these problem facilities and their families who are trying to keep them safe. The members of Elder Voice Family Advocates thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sundberg. And thank you for listening to all the family members and being part of that working group. Thank you very much. Thank all three of you for coming down. Oh, Senator Frentz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ms. Sundberg, I just had a question for you. Thank you, everyone, for your stories, and thanks for taking the time. I know it's tough. We hear staff ratios of 1 to 53. We hear double shifts. Which of the recommendations in the report do you feel are most likely to help us address those issues? As we see the reporting and the processing of the complaints is one issue, but we're really interested also in prevention, not having it happen to the next family. And staffing seems to be something that the committee's heard enough about. I'm just curious if you'd care to share with us any suggestions?
Without getting into the specifics, we are, language is being drafted and being shared, but we do think there needs to be staffing standards established, and we also believe the assisted living industry needs to be licensed. I think that's critical, and those issues then would get addressed in various of those measures.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Frentz. Thank you, all three of you. Ms. Patty Sagert, Christine Olson, and Martha McCabe. We'll wait till we get these. Thank you, Mr. Olson. Go ahead, Ms. Sagert.
Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Patty Sagert. Thank you for hearing my testimony today. My father, Dennis, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's over 10 years ago. Since August 2015, my dad has been in 3 hospitals, 3 memory care units, and 2 transitional care facilities. Finding a quality care setting is a challenging process. Unfortunately, what we have found is promises were made, many were not delivered. In August 2015, we were counseled by the VA hospital staff that we needed to move my dad into a memory care facility. We spent days and many hours diligently searching for the appropriate setting. We moved my dad into a small assisted living and memory care unit that was supposed to be his forever home. Unfortunately, our faith and trust with this facility was irreparably broken due to neglect. My dad was left unattended in a local hospital for 12 hours, as our family was not informed he was there. At that point, we had no choice but to find a new facility for him. We moved him into a larger, newer facility. They promised our family 24-hour on-duty nursing care, level pricing, a nationally recognized memory care training program that every staff received, and a quality of life activities program, everything you'd want. It quickly became clear to our family that the memory care unit was not a fully functioning memory care unit. This facility began to use a temporary agency to staff many shifts, causing inconsistency in care and unsafe conditions for residents. I met with the facility leaders and 2 regional directors. I called and made complaints above that to discuss our issues. Our concerns fell on deaf ears. We were subjected to misrepresentations regarding my dad's behavior and retaliation. Shortly after Thanksgiving, my father suffered a stroke. The social worker at the hospital informed us that the facility would not allow him back. When we moved him to the facility, we were assured that they would be able to provide care for him up until his death. Another false promise. After spending 60 days in transitional care, we moved my dad to his new facility, his 3rd facility. Throughout our collective experiences, we found a lack of transparency and honesty. Facilities are great at marketing services, but many are not capable of actually delivering them. We've had some amazing caregivers. What we saw on a day-to-day basis is that the exceptional caregivers were the ones who were called in when someone else missed a shift. As a result, the quality caregivers worked double shifts, leading to burnout, many quitting because they couldn't handle the pressure. Clearly, staffing ratios and training are not adequate or consistent. We attempted to find surveys and complaints on the Department of Health website. This was like finding a needle in a haystack. We had to call the Department of Health directly to find out where they were housed on the website. When we did find them, we were horrified. We were surprised to find out that the surveys for assisted living and memory care facilities are required every 3 years, which is inconsistent with skilled nursing facilities' 1-year requirement. I was appalled to see many Department of Health substantiated complaints penalize non-compliant facilities at such a nominal level. Our vulnerable adults deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. They deserve to have high quality and consistent care and enriching activities. In conclusion, I am really hopeful, I'm really filled with optimism that the voices of our families of loved ones will be heard and that you, our legislators in Minnesota, will have the courage to adopt the Consumer Work Group's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sagert. Ms. Olson.
Hi, thank you for hearing me. I am the daughter of Richard Olson, who was born in 1939 on the family farm located near Ostrander in southeastern Minnesota. These are the words of my father on January 17th of this year. I completed college degrees with honors, a BA in math and an MBA from the University of Minnesota. I had 46 years of continuous electronic systems employment, beginning with UNIVAC computer programs and ending with the largest computer industry company, Lockheed Martin. I include this information so that you can see throughout my lifetime I have been a productive, dependable employee and person. My personal financial problems are of a relatively short duration. 5 years ago, my wife was still living. I had $340,000 in my 401k. I owned a $205,000 home in rural Northfield. My yearly pension is $57,000 a year. These monies have all been spent on medical bills and care centers. My dad was quite sad at times when he ran out of money in 2015 and was unable to pay his own way. I would remind him that he deserved to be cared for by a system that he had paid into for 46 years. an elder care system that was designed to care for him with compassion and kindness in the latter and the most vulnerable years of his life. My father moved to the Zumbrota Care Center in January of 2015, where he resided until his death on October 30th, 2017. The Zumbrota Care Center was found guilty of negligence in the care of my father by the Minnesota Department of Health on January 17th of this year. The reports concluded that the facility was found to be non-compliant on federal regulations for long-term care facility 42 CRS Part 483 Subpart B and state licensing rules for nursing homes, Minnesota Rules Chapter 4658. The care center also engaged in verbally abusing my father throughout his entire time staying there. They bullied him over financial issues and threats of eviction. The court-appointed conservator violated my father's rights and violated state and federal law. My dad had received a 30-day eviction notice from 6 months after being entering the care center. My father did not have any money to pay the bill other than his pension and Social Security, which was $4,750 a month that the care center was already receiving. My dad's brother, Dr. Robert Olson, made the following note to his sister Julie in an email dated June 7, 2015. We rushed to speak to Richard and administrator and head of finances at the Zumbrota Nursing Care and were handed one, a $21,000 bill, and two, the 30-day eviction notice of Richard Olson. The nursing home would not even give him another oxycodone pain pill, creating Richard's medical crisis. And he continues, in tears last night, he left a long, tearful message. Family, please pray for Richard Olson. His mind is good, but he is so emotionally upset with continued uncertainty. This was uncharacteristic of my father, being extremely distraught over and clearly reflected the emotional suffering he was enduring because of not knowing if he would be able to live there. The administration continued to threaten my father with eviction. The second way in which care center staff would threaten my father was through threats of eviction by their his required signature on 18-day bed holds. The Zumbrota Care Center had an eviction policy that did not allow residents to return to the nursing home to live after they had been in the hospital for more than 18 days. They enforced this policy by mandating signatures from residents prior to releasing them from the care center. Whatever my father's medical condition was at the time, it did not matter. He had to sign the document prior to them releasing him from the care center to the emergency personnel that were waiting with an ambulance to transport him to the hospital. There are many documented incidences. I was his medical power of attorney. I have read the medical notes of his attending physician, Dr. Maelstrom, who confirms, even after a conservator was appointed to handle his finances, which the family agreed to, so in the hopes that he would not have these threats of financial of eviction because of finances. And there, I read a Dr. Maelstrom's notes where in July of 2017, there was a care conference and they did indeed talk to my father about finances and what he owed the care center. This was 9 months after he no longer had control of his finances. The last thing I would like to talk to you about is the actions of the court-appointed conservator from October of 2016 to 2017. This conservator violated HIPAA laws by contacting Mayo Clinic and replacing my brother as a medical emergency contact and putting her name on instead of my brother. She violated his HIPAA laws by having the access. She abused the power that the court had given her for finances to become a medical person that could see his records. She also changed his address so he no longer got notification of his appointments. And finally, she violated state law, Minnesota Statute 524.3805, classification of claims by not following statute in the specific financial distribution of his assets, whereby reasonable funeral expenses were second on the list and nursing home expenses are fourth. She did not, she was not willing to provide, she did not provide any finances towards a burial for my father.
Thank you so much, Ms. Olson, for coming in, and thanks for your written testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Ms. McCabe.
Hi. I'm Martha McCabe, and thank you for hearing all our stories today. It gives me some hope. Okay, this understaffing, and I know you've heard a lot about understaffing, but it's becoming a very dangerous game that these corporate entities are playing, facilities, and falls and UTIs are the biggest danger I see to the elderly in these facilities. My mother has fallen several times. Both of the assisted living facilities that she's been in lured us in with agreement that the staffing and cares would be provided, that they would hire more people if needed, if people's staffing, their needs increased. Neither facility did that. When we complained at the first facility, they told us this was a month-by-month rental agreement, and, you know, we could leave at any time. That was fine for us to just leave. She was 90 years old. I explained that to her, or 89, and that, you know, moving people this age is not a good thing. So we moved her out. At the same time, when this was going on, other people, because they moved into the facilities, they're in walkers, they're a little bit healthy, they can care for themselves, so you're preparing. You know, you want them to live at a place, they know where things are, they won't get acclimated and that kind of thing, and then they start to fail a bit. Well, as this is going on, I'm noticing other residents being moved out. They're being moved across the street to the nursing home this facility owns. So they're feeding people, and they're in no different shape than my mother. So they're feeding their nursing home from the assisted living. And the same thing they're trying to do to us. Well, this nursing home was about the same price, $7,800 a month. Well, it was more, actually, a little bit more, as the facility we moved her to. The facility we moved her to said they would answer call lights in 7 minutes. You know, that's just how it was. They would staff for cares. You know, of course they would make sure that she was going to the bathroom, because otherwise I'd have to change them because she was wet. So the last straw for me was when she was on Super Bowl Sunday. I was called that she was sick. She was not responding well, not eating. They'd put her in her wheelchair, and she was falling forward and falling out. And so I, you know, went to the facility quickly. She's to the point in life now at 93 that, you know, you're not going to rush her to the hospital. So I stayed throughout the day, that day with her, and then realized there were only 3 aides on for 2 floors of people needing cares. There was a woman sitting in a hall by that evening, and she'd been sitting there for an hour and a half, waiting to go to bed with no help and, you know, just waiting. So this is a long time. This is now hours she's been in that wheelchair, not gone to the bathroom, nothing. My mother's in bed, so I sent the aide with them. The next day, I'm putting my mother on hospice. So I go to the hospice meeting, and then I see the director of the facility, and I mentioned to her, by the way, there were 3 staff on last night, and, you know, and then I heard, actually, there was 1 staff on at some point during the week. So this is continuing to get worse. And I said, this has got to change. There's something wrong. She started smirking and laughing at me. Oh, well, Martha, you know the medical field. We can't get staffing and things like that. So, I, you know, I'm sorry, that just made me get confusing.
Just wrap up.
And so then I called the Department of Health, And because she does get UTIs, she does fall, there's not enough staffing to take care of people. Takes 45 minutes just to get a meal there, takes 45 minutes to get a call light answered. People are getting sick, and administration and people up above don't care.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. McCabe. And our last testifier, thank all three of you for coming down and testifying. Thank you. Ken George.
Can I testify as well?
Pardon me? No, we have to be out of this room in 4 minutes.
Well, it'll take 1 minute.
Sorry. Mr. George.
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead and say your name for the tape.
My name's Ken George. I have a bachelor's degree in psychobiology, and I was trained on a master's level to care for people with special needs. Everything people say here is true, and it's happening right this minute. I know this because my friend was Ralph Ford, and I spent every weekend with him for the past 12 years, and I witnessed this. And I also learned to keep my head down and my mouth shut, because as people know, you get kicked out for bringing up problems. So I saw a lot because I learned to keep my mouth shut, but I was there, and I took care of them and did what I could until they kicked me out finally. I'm proud it took them 12 years to catch me. And I reported, I sent in reports, I tried to help, and I was told that I'm just an amateur, I'm a lay person, and leave it to the professionals. They're in charge. In their tenure, this is going on, and apparently it's getting worse. And I don't have to give any more anecdotal stories. My story that I'd like to present are what's degenerated is a system of, it's more like a concentration camp mentality than a care facility. There's a lot of parallels to the behaviors of the caregivers that resemble prison guards at the concentration camps. And it's not their fault. They're not trained and they're not supervised. Or if they are, I want to know who's training them to be like this. You know, I witnessed the licensing procedure because I was in these places for 12 years watching, and the way the procedure works is the state calls them up and says, we're coming, get ready. And so you'll see a place where you have one nurse pushing a cart around, giving drugs to people slumped over in wheelchairs, an aide responding to call lights, first come, maybe first serve, to a place after they got notice that I see everybody I know that actually works there at once, giving care, supervisor I've never seen before supervising, activities going on, and they get their license. Next day, not a soul in sight because they all used up their hours. And so it's a fraud what the state does to say they're licensing these facilities. I'm ashamed of that. You know, I know they know, because when they know they're being inspected, they know what to do, but they don't do it. You know, and, you know, if we're going to say it's because it's low staffing or you can't get someone there, I don't know. My time's up.
Thank you very much, Mr. George. Ralph Ford was lucky to have you for a friend, and Connie is his daughter, so thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for coming down and driving from all over the state, and sharing your story, because I know it's not easy, and a lot of tears were shed and will continue to be shed. It's apparent we do have a failing state system here. investigating the wrong facility, reports going uninvestigated, family members not getting any answers, that we are going to be addressing, and the AARP report from the consumer group. We will be working on that going forward, from the cameras and licensing the facilities, data privacy. We're going to be addressing all of that going forward. Next week, we will be having the facilities in here, the providers. This was also live streamed on the state's website, so if you can't drive down here, you can go online and you'll be able to see it. They will be talking about what they are doing to prevent these stories from happening. Again, and I've said it every time, we do have a lot of amazing caregivers out there. Every once in a while, there's a bad actor, and unfortunately, you guys are on the consumer end of it, and that's what we really need to prevent, and we need to work on our state system to get that done. So thank you again. I want to thank, I saw Amanda here from Elder Justice. I want to thank her for helping some of the people who are at the table. I want to thank Elder Voices for being here also. I saw Susie Scheller somewhere in the audience. But again, thank you all for your stories. Continue to email me, and we will hear them. And thank you, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Oh, I got to gavel us out.